Welcome to Season 3 of Adventures in Compliance. In this season, we are reviewing all of the Sherlock Holmes stories which are collected in the work The Return of Sherlock Holmes. It is a collection of 13 detective stories written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, marking the reappearance of the brilliant detective Sherlock Holmes after his apparent death in The Final Problem, which ended Season 2 and was the last story in the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. The collection spans various intriguing cases and mysteries that Holmes and his loyal friend Dr. Watson tackle. First, a word from this month's sponsor of the Compliance Podcast Network, Ethico.
In the intricate world of ethics and compliance, each second is precious, and slow case closures are more than just delays, they're missed opportunities. Enter Ethico. Our solution revolutionizes case management, cutting case closure times in half and turning every challenge into a chance for improvement. Imagine a workspace where efficiency and compliance coexist harmoniously. Don't just dream of faster resolutions, make it your reality. Visit ethico.com/CPN today to book a demo and dive into our exclusive white paper by Tom Fox, 2023, The Year in Compliance. Empower your team with the tools they deserve.
Today, we are back to one of the most well-known Sherlock Holmes stories, The Adventure of the Abbey Grange, which was published September 1904 in the Strand magazine and opens with one of the greatest lines Conan Doyle ever wrote for Sherlock Holmes. If you enjoyed this episode, you've enjoyed this series, or you just like stories about Sherlock Holmes, I hope you will subscribe or rate and review to this podcast, wherever great podcasts are listened to. Even more than elementary, my dear Watson, the line, "The game's afoot," is one of the greatest lines ever in Sherlock Holmes. And that's what opens this short story as Watson was asleep and a candle woke him, and Holmes said, "Come, Watson, come. The game is afoot." The game is afoot. It's a great expression and an indolent one, too, alive with possibility, drama, and excitement, heralding all the sheer joy with which Sherlock Holmes approaches his vocation. It was all a game, a great game of wits and wisdom, and a new round was about to commence. The Randall gang were already among the country's most notorious and wanted burglars, long before Inspector Hopkins threw them as the prime suspects of murder at the Abbey Grange. Sir Eustace Blackenstall is dead, and his wife, the Australian-born Lady Mary, struck over one eye, is nursing a purple swelling. But when Holmes is called by the perplexed Hopkins, two strange red marks on her arm, and her maid explained that Sir Eustace was responsible for them. He had stabbed her with a hat pin. The marriage was not a happy one. Sir Eustace was a violent and abusive man and an alcoholic who regularly beat and tormented his wife, his maid, and even her pet dog. But when he ultimately killed the dog, that's when things broke. Lady Mary is horrified by the brutal death of her husband, killed with a single blow from a poker while she laid helpless, stunned by a blow to the head, tied to a chair with a bell rope and gagged. The raiders and robbers were not in a hurry, drifting in and out of consciousness. Lady Mary awoke at one point to see the intruders sitting carelessly, helping themselves to some wine. The men, one older, two younger, then left with a few pieces of silver. Holmes is intrigued by the story. The bell rope, for instance, the very act of cutting it down should have set bells clanging in the kitchen, yet no one heard a thing. He knows a few details about the wine bottle and the glasses, and the matters concern him the most have more in common with what did not happen. The Randall gang had just undertaken a major job elsewhere. Normally they would lay low to avoid capture, not to set out on even a more audacious raid. But here they did. Nothing else had been disturbed, yet the Randalls were notorious ransackers. Holmes pointed out that the wine bottle they opened had been left half full. Crime was committed at 11 p.m., an early hour for burglary. The knots in the rope bell that bound Lady Mary were uncommonly well tied, even for the Randall gang. Sir Eustace's blood was spattered on the seat of a chair that his wife claimed to have been seated at when the fray occurred. The murderer, Holmes declares, is not the Randall gang. The murderer is a 6'3" tall sailor who fell in love with Lady Blackensmell when she sailed from England to England from Australia some 18 months earlier. The missing silver was found nearby in a lake close by the hole that recently had broken in the ice. By the time he arrives to 221B, another piece of evidence has turned up. The Randall gang itself had been arrested in New York City. Soon, Holmes is hearing the entire story from the sailor himself, Captain Crocker, and it becomes clear that murder was committed in self-defense after he foolishly tried to visit Lady Mary that night and was instead greeted by her drunken husband. The story of the raid was concocted with the help of their maid, Teresa, and Crocker is quite willing to accept the consequences of his actions in all of these matters. Yet, Holmes sets him free, declaring that English justice was done in this case. This is really a delicious Sherlock Holmes story, and I hope you will take the opportunity to reread it after you listen to this podcast. But what I'd like to talk about today is a couple of different aspects to the story. The first one is investigative lessons from this story, and I think there are several that can be drawn from it. Number one, attention to detail. Holmes often emphasizes the importance of observing the smallest details. In this case, he notices seemingly insignificant clues like the absence of footprints in the mud outside the house. Number two, questioning of witnesses. Holmes of course, is adept at questioning witnesses and extracting relevant information. His interviews with Lady Mary and her maid provide crucial insights into the events leading to the murder. Number three, forensic examination. Holmes carefully examines forensic evidence such as footprints, broken glass, and bloodstains to reconstruct the sequence of events and identify inconsistencies in the subject's stories. Number four, logical deductions. Holmes employs logical deduction to piece together the facts of the case and arrives at the most probable solution. He uses his knowledge of human nature to understand the motives of the suspects and anticipate their actions. Number five, disguise and infiltration. Holmes occasionally adopts disguises to gather information unnoticed. In the Abbey Grange, he disguises himself as a sailor to infiltrate the scene of the crime and observe without arousing suspicion. Persistence. There's one thing a compliance professional must have, it's persistence. And Holmes demonstrates persistence in following up on the leads and pursuing the truth, even when faced with obstacles or dead ends. Now let's look at this case through the lens of some data analytics issues. And you typically would not think of Sherlock Holmes as informing data analytics, but I actually saw several in this case. Number one, the importance of data collection. Holmes meticulously collects data from the crime scene, including physical evidence like footprints and bloodstains, as well as testimony from witnesses. This highlights the critical importance of comprehensive data collection in any investigative process or simply analytic process, such as a compliance professional would use. Number two, data interpretation and pattern recognition. Sherlock Holmes excels in interpreting data and recognizing the pattern that others might overlook. He's able to deduce crucial insights from seemingly unrelated pieces of information, showcasing the importance of analytical skills in making sense of the data. Number three, hypothetical testing. Sherlock Holmes forms hypotheses based on the data he's gathered and systematically tests them against additional evidence. This is a strategy and technique that every compliance professional should utilize, as it mirrors the scientific method and emphasizes the importance of hypothesis testing in data analytics to validate findings and draw reliable conclusions. Number four, predictive analytics. Holmes often makes predictions and anticipates the actions of suspects based upon the analysis of available data. For the compliance professional, this demonstrates the application of predictive analytics to forecast future events or behavior using historical data. Data visualization. Data visualization, I think, plays a critical process in the Holmes analytic process. Data visualization represents representations of data such as charts and diagrams, which help identify and show trends, correlations, and anomalies more easily, facilitating the analysis and communication of findings. This is critical for every compliance professional going forward. Number 6, cross-referencing and correlation analysis. Holmes cross-references different sources of data and conducts correlation analysis to uncover connections between seemingly disparate pieces of information. For the compliance professional, this approach is akin to data linkage and correlation analysis techniques used today, and it reveals relationships between data sets. As the Department of Justice has told us, you have to be able to cut across the data lakes in your organization. And number 7, iterative analysis. Holmes' investigation is an iterative process where new data leads to revisions of hypotheses and further analysis. In the compliance world, we call this continuous monitoring and our ongoing monitoring rather than continuous improvement, as this approach mirrors the iterative nature of data analytics, where insights are refined through successive rounds of data collection, analysis, and interpretation. You might even think of that in a root cause analysis. I'd like to look at a couple of ethical issues in this matter. First, privacy and confidentiality. Throughout the story, Holmes uncovers personal and potentially damaging information about individuals involved in the case. The ethical implications of invading privacy and disclosing sensitive data without consent raises questions respecting confidentiality and personal boundaries. Obviously, this is something that is critical if your company is covered by GDPR, and you will need to be able to show that you have not invaded privacy and you've had consent to do so if you have. Justice versus revenge. That is a key theme in this case, as the motive behind Sir Eustace's murder is revealed to be an act of revenge by Captain Croker seeking retribution for Lady Mary's mistreatment. Obviously, justice system aims to provide fair punishment for crimes, but the line between seeking justice and revenge can become blurred, raising ethical questions. And finally, professional ethics. As a detective, Holmes is bound by the highest professional ethics and codes of conduct. His unorthodox methods, however, do raise ethical questions about the boundaries of professional conduct. For the compliance professional, this means you must stay clear of any such issues. Compliance Podcast Network is sponsored this month by Ethico. Ethico is a leader for compliance champions like yourself with its ethics and compliance optimization system built to turn goals and guidelines into real ROI for your program. For more information and a special white paper, go to ethico.com/CPN. I hope you will join me through this entire series of short stories from the return of Sherlock Holmes. If you're a Holmes fan or you enjoy analogizing to compliance, leadership, and ethics, this is the podcast series for you. I hope you will take the opportunity to reread one or perhaps all of the short stories. They're short reads and a lot of fun. I'm going to be taking a deep dive into each one of them, looking at leadership lessons, ethical lessons, and or compliance lessons from each one. If you're a Sherlock Holmes aficionado like myself, I'd love to visit with you about some of your favorite stories and perhaps record a podcast or two with you on them. So please contact me. You can reach me through the website of the Compliance Podcast Network. Adventures in Compliance is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. And as I mentioned, we are sponsored this month by Ethico. So I hope you will check out the Ethico white paper that's available through their special link on that we put in the show notes that I mentioned earlier. This is Tom Fox. I'm greatly looking forward to the return of Sherlock Holmes.